Hi, welcome to Joy in Our Town, and I'm your host, Doreen Jones. And today we're going to be talking about what to do before, during, and after a disaster. Now, I know we don't want to really think about it, but we need to start preparing. And so today, our guest is from FEMA, and they're going to talk to us about how to prepare and to get ourselves ready in case of a national disaster. Will you welcome with me Mike Sharon?
Hi.
Mike, so glad to have you with us.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, Doreen.
Good,
Thank you.
good. You're from FEMA.
I am.
Well, why don't we tell our viewers what FEMA is, just in case someone is not aware?
Sure. FEMA is part of the Department of Homeland Security and stands for the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And our job is to work with citizens and governments to be sure that they're prepared before, during, and after disasters. And if state and local governments are overwhelmed and citizens need help, we also come in with some of our federal programs to help them in some of the larger disasters that you may have heard about.
Give us an example. I know we've seen things on TV, but let's break it down about a disaster, how FEMA came in.
Sure. Well, we got, unfortunately, a lot of them here recently in the Delaware Valley, and great examples to look at. We talked about Hurricane Sandy, which I know is very near and dear on the minds of many of your viewers. In that particular case, the storm came ashore, but even before the storm arrived here in the Delaware Valley in New York and New Jersey, our folks were already out there linked up with state governments, with local governments, looking at the kinds of needs that they might have for their governments and for their citizens after that storm passed through. And after the weather had cleared, we assisted in getting roads open, getting generators, getting supplies to individuals that have been impacted, and up in the New York and New Jersey area, getting folks back into some kind of safe shelter so that they had a roof over their heads and a place to stay as they went forward in rebuilding their lives.
So what is our best course of action to prepare before? Because we want to talk about before, during, and after.
Sure. Well, before, and one of the things we're here to talk about for National Preparedness Month, there's really 4 steps that we talk about. First is to be informed, and then to make a plan, build a kit, and then get involved. And we can talk about each of those a little bit more, but the first and most important step is be informed. Be aware of the kinds of hazards and the kinds of emergencies that may impact your community. Not just the big things, tornadoes and hurricanes, but be aware of the threats that could be around your own house. A fire in your house is a disaster. It may not involve FEMA, but it's a disaster and it may have a great impact on your life. So know the kind of risks that you're up against.
Could a winter storm be considered a national disaster?
Absolutely. We haven't had a lot of snow recently, but you'll remember a couple of years ago here in the Delaware Valley, we had back-to-back days where we get a foot or more of snow. And for many of us who are younger, a little more able-bodied, that may not be a big deal. Maybe it's a day off work, maybe not. But you may have older neighbors or other folks that may have some difficulty getting their streets shoveled, things like that. And so for them, it could have a great impact because it impairs their mobility, makes it harder for them to get food. And so again, those kinds of things can really tie up a community for days on end. So we think of snow as something very nice, but too much snow could be a bad thing.
Too much of anything can be a bad thing.
Absolutely.
What about people that are caught in a storm and they're sitting in a car, bumper to bumper traffic? What's the best way for them what are some of the things that we need to know in order to get out of it?
Mm-hmm. Well, in the larger kinds of events, a hurricane or a winter storm, government tries to work to get the word out to the public so that folks aren't out evacuating, aren't caught in the middle of that event. But there could be a situation, let's say you're on the turnpike or on the highway, where a tornado or a sudden storm appears. And in that case, if you're stuck in traffic or if you're out there on your own, it's best to stay in your car if you possibly can with your seatbelt buckled, because believe it or not, your car is really the safest place. You've probably seen some video over the years of people going into highway overpasses and things like that to take shelter. It's really not a good idea. You want to stay in your vehicle, or if you can get lower than the level of the roadway, if you're going to leave your vehicle, get into a ditch or a lower level like that and lie flat. But an underpass is not a good place to be. So stay in your car, or if you're going to abandon your car, get out into a ditch. Now, the other thing that you may commonly encounter if you're out driving around is flooding on a roadway. A very simple thing to remember: turn around, don't drown. If you see water on a roadway, if you're not sure if it's deep enough for you to be able to drive through, you probably shouldn't be driving through it, because it only takes a couple of inches of water to float a car, and then you become someone who needs to be rescued instead of someone who's just trying to get home to their family.
I like what you said, turn around.
Don't drown.
And don't drown.
Right.
What about in the vehicle? Is there emergency kits or first aid for cars?
I think you want to do a few very basic things if you spend a lot of time in your car. And it depends on season. In the wintertime, it's always a good idea to have something like a blanket or some extra warm clothes in case your car breaks down. Maybe a small shovel. and things like kitty litter to help you if you get stuck. The shovel, you can remove the snow, and kitty litter and things like that will help you with traction. And it's very important to keep your car in good working order so that you don't have to worry about your battery or your oil change and things like that. And keeping your car healthy is the best way to be safe if you're going to be out on the road.
What about in our home? What type of aid should we have?
Well, we recommend, and that's part of what I mentioned about building a kit, that you have some basic supplies so that you're self-sufficient for generally about 72 hours. And that's on the outside. If you can have supplies to be on your own for more than 72 hours, that's a good thing. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a special kit. What you might want to do is make sure that you have enough food and enough water on hand at all times so that you're not like so many of us going out to get bread, milk, and toilet paper before the first snowstorm arrives. Just keep those things handy so that you have those extra couple of days of non-perishable foods and water that if you need them, you can tap into them. Medical supplies are very important. Many of us have special medication or other types of needs, and you want to make sure that you have plenty of medication on hand so that if your pharmacy or something is disrupted, that you're not in a crisis and not having to get medicine in an emergency. And I know one of my other colleagues on one of your other segments talked about things like cell phones and chargers. Mm-hmm. So many of us, like me, rely on having your cell phone and your computer, and think about a way of keeping that charged, whether it's a charger for your car or maybe a little hand crank radio, things like flashlights. All the very basic things that you really have around the house. You probably just never thought about them being in a kit, but just kind of putting them in one place where you can get to them very quickly.
Can you give us a scenario of a situation where if someone had only been prepared, a lot of damage could have been avoided?
Yeah, and there's a lot of tragic examples over the years. I think we saw in things like Hurricane Katrina and even the recent flooding in Colorado where folks got caught off guard. And some of that is in the not being aware or not being informed perhaps of some of the hazards. I think it's very important to make sure that you have those kinds of supplies, and also part of being informed is listening to instructions that you may get from your local authorities, be it something on the broadcast news, or if your local police or fire service arrives at your door and asks you to evacuate, that you take heed of that information because they're doing it for your safety and they don't take those kinds of decisions lightly.
Now, does the general public get enough warning in advance from?
I think our friends at the National Weather Service and other organizations do a really great job on getting the warning out. Used to be years ago, it would take up to the most amount of warning you might have would be a few minutes before a tornado, 5 or 10 minutes, and now they've been able to extend that out to about 15 or 20 minutes. And with hurricanes and winter storms, we usually have pretty good notice on when those things are coming. The Weather Service puts it out. Our local news media certainly covers those things. So we try to get the word out as quickly and effectively as we can, as soon as we know things. But you can only warn so much. Many of your viewers will remember the earthquakes that we had a couple of years ago, and there couldn't have been any warning on that. So then it becomes a matter of trying to get out the best information to everyone about what has taken place and what they can do to continue to remain safe.
In a situation, what is the best way to stay connected and united with your loved ones, just in case?
Yeah, the most important thing is to have an out-of-area contact so that you have someone that you can reach out to that's outside your immediate area that your other family members can contact to let them know that you're okay. Social media, if you have access, if your cell phone's still working or you have access to a computer, things like Facebook and Twitter, and some of the emergency applications that are available through FEMA and the American Red Cross will allow you to get that information out to a wide audience. A friend of mine works at the Washington Navy Yard where we had a very tragic shooting a couple of weeks ago, and it was the first way that I knew I'd be able to reach him or find out about his status was I know he uses Facebook a lot, and sure enough, I checked his Facebook page and he was able to post to that from inside the Navy Yard, letting his family know that he was all right, and everyone else around the country.
So during a disaster, what are some of the things that we can do to ensure safety for our family and our
Well, if it's a disaster without warning, like a tornado or an earthquake, typically we think of things like tornadoes in this area in the Delaware Valley. The most important thing to do is if your life's in immediate jeopardy is, depending on the situation, if it's weather outside, you want to take shelter immediately. In the case of a tornado, go to an interior room or the basement of your house if you have a basement, and shelter until the storm passes by. Again, heed instructions if you're asked to evacuate, if you need to get out of your house due to a fire or due to something else taking place on the outside. Evacuate quickly. Take the bare minimum of things that you need to get your life back in order, but get yourself, your family, your pets to safety. so that you can get on, that you don't become an additional burden to the responders that are in there trying to help out.
Now, we talked about before, we talked about during. Now tell us about what we need to do afterwards.
Well, the first thing, should you have the unfortunate circumstance be part of a disaster, the first thing that I would ask your viewers is to be patient with your local government, with your state, with your federal government. Everyone wants to get you back into their homes. We want to take care of you as quickly as we can, but disasters are tricky things, and there's sometimes not a lot of information. So listen to the instructions that are provided. If you need help, ask for help. Around here during Hurricane Irene, Tropical Storm Lee, there's a lot of information published about how to get assistance after a declared disaster. We'll publish a FEMA 800 number that you can call for register for that assistance, because we can help you if we don't know that you're out there. And let your family know that you're okay, because they will be very, very worried, especially if communications are difficult.
So let's just summarize for our viewers. What would you say would be the most important things for them to do in a situation like this?
Well, it's to take action now, to be informed about the hazards that may face them in their community, to make a plan, to know what they're going to do before, during, and after the emergency, to build a kit using things that they have around the house or things that are already in their car, and to get involved. We talk about first responders and we think of police and fire, but the first responders during are probably going to be you and I, neighbors helping neighbors, you and I out there with that snow shovel helping an elderly neighbor during a snowstorm, or making sure that our neighbors are okay after a tornado. So those 4 simple steps taken now can help them through all phases of the emergency.
Where can our viewers go to get more information concerning FEMA?
Lots of good information out there. The website I'd recommend that they go to is www.ready.gov, which gives you all kinds of great information about those 4 types of areas. And if they want to learn more about FEMA, I think we have a website also. It's www.fema.gov. That one's geared a little more toward government, but ready.gov is a great first starting point.
So for first responders, what should be their first thing that they need to do?
For our first responders and this citizen first responders is keep yourself safe, but check on your neighbors. And if you can, get some training. Take a first aid class, learn how to do CPR, because you may be the hero in your own neighborhood at a time when you least expect it.
Now that's a good point, but most people probably don't know where to go to get the training. Can you tell us where we need to go?
Sure. Again, ready.gov will give you links to your local, to what we call Citizen Corps, but also here in the Delaware Valley, each of your counties and the city of Philadelphia Emergency Management Agency, and those local emergency management agencies, which also run our 911 system, have a lot of great volunteer opportunities and can link citizens up with some of the volunteer groups and the training that they might need to be responders in their own communities.
What would you say to our local community leaders, pastors and churches?
That's a great point, because those local communities are a great source of information. We saw after Tropical Storm Lee, the churches were a fantastic way to get the word out, because they've got those great links to their congregation. And I'd encourage those kinds of community groups, even if they're not formal disaster groups, to be prepared and to be prepared to help the members of their community. We all know our neighbors. It's a great social organization, and who better to know the needs of their residents, of their congregants, the folks in religious institutions, and some of the other community groups like Lions Clubs, American Legion, Rotary, all those kinds of things. There you have people who are interested in helping, have the skills, and have the heart and want to be part of it. So that's a great place to start outside of a formal disaster organization.
People helping people, is that right?
That's right.
That is so good. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you, Doreen.
Enjoyed talking with you, and I know our viewers have learned a few things. It's just time. It's time now to prepare our hearts and get ready, and to know that anything can happen at any time, but the best protection is when we become prepared. So we thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next broadcast.